Welcome to the Doctors Making a Difference podcast, where we help physicians to be empowered with the tools they need to be successful in medicine, in finance, and in life. Join us as we highlight doctors and other professionals around the world who are making a difference. Doctors change lives every day, but what happens when life changes yours? A single injury, a sudden illness, your career, your income, your future can shift in an instant. The best physicians don't just plan for success, they protect it. At Set for Life Insurance, they believe financial security isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. True own occupation disability insurance ensures that no matter what happens, your future stays in your hands. Because protecting your income means protecting everything you've built. Visit drpodcastnetwork.co/set for life today. Secure your future before life makes the choice for you. Have you ever thought about becoming a podcaster? You're in the middle of your busy medical career and it seems like everybody else is doing podcasting. How could you possibly find time to do this? Today, we get the privilege of hearing from Dr. Bradley Block and how he actually did this in his real life practice. Dr. Block, introduce yourself, please.
First of all, it's an honor to be here. I've been so excited about this interview. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Brad Block. I'm a private practice otolaryngologist on Long Island, partner in ENT and Allergy Associates is the name of my practice. And I've been a physician podcaster for 6+ years. My show is called The Physician's Guide to Doctoring, where the tagline is everything we should have been learning while we were memorizing Krebs cycle.
That's pretty cool. Well, and think back. So I want to kind of go way back, to kind of what made you become a doctor, and then let's just kind of walk me through this journey. How did you go from being an otolaryngologist by day to also being a podcaster, I guess, by night?
So I'll do the short version. So my decision to become a doctor is a rather uninspiring one. Like, unlike yourself, your story is really pretty incredible, right? You're a family doctor, a rural family doctor in the town that you grew up in. Like, it's like, Doc Hollywood, right? I remember seeing that show with Michael J. Fox and like, you're that guy, right? My story was a little less inspiring. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life when I was in college. I knew I was good at science. I was planning on going into business somehow. I didn't even know what that meant. And I had no path whatsoever. I studied abroad in Jerusalem, which is, if you've never been to that city, it's one of those cities in the world that there's no city like it. It's just an incredible place, and it's an inspiring place. And as it turns out, one of my friends, who I'm still friends with, that we met while studying abroad, was planning on being a doctor. And that city really had an effect on me. I wanted to do something important with my life. And the other thing that being a doctor did was it gave me a clear path. So I went suddenly from having no path whatsoever to a very clear path to a career laid out for me. So one, I wanted to do something inspiring because of the effect that the city had on me. And the second was I just had no idea what I was going to do. And it gave me that clear path. So not a very inspiring story, but there it was. And so then I went to medical school. I got in off the wait list to one medical school. So I made it on the skin of my teeth, ended up spending 4 years at SUNY Buffalo, where there's not much to do except study. So that went well. So then I managed to do that to match into a competitive residency program in otolaryngology at Georgetown, which is where I did my training. How did I pick otolaryngology? Another uninspiring story. We do cool stuff. Like,
Absolutely.
Like we do, like, it's really interesting, neat stuff that we take care of, whether it's the procedures that we do in the office or what we do in the operating room. I wasn't really a big fan of the big interventions, right? Like these big head and neck cancer resections was never really my thing. And so it's not part of my practice now for a multitude of reasons, but the smaller interventions that really make a big difference, I really enjoyed doing. And so there I am, a private practice otolaryngologist on Long Island. And then podcaster, how did I get into that, right? Where we are, the short version. So one of the challenges that we all face is seeing patients efficiently and effectively, right? We can really get to know our patients if we take the time to do it. But that takes forever, right?
That's the hardest part.
We don't have an hour to spend with each patient. We just don't have it, right? And so how do you do that without sacrificing efficiency? And, what we learned in medical school was listen, you got to listen, just listen. Make sure you're listening. You're not listening. Stop, listen. Okay, fine, I get it. We need to listen and sit down, right? That's basically the training that I got in medical school and residency in communication. And what I discovered is that there are a lot of communication experts out there, but they weren't talking about doctor-patient interactions. They're doing it now, but when I started my show 6 years ago, it really wasn't something that people were talking about as much, at least not in places where I could easily find them, like a podcast. And so my goal was to find these experts and parlay their expertise into a book that was specific to, so focus their expertise through my lens as a physician onto that interaction, right? I was going to write a book. Never started a page.
Not yet.
Nothing. Zero. Yes. Well, no, actually, it's funny because it's coming for Slicker. I do plan on writing that book now. And then I was like, okay, book's never happening. What if I do it in like a bite-sized way with a blog post? Never wrote a blog post, never. So I was like, okay, what's even easier than that? What if I just ask them questions in a podcast? So I'll start a podcast. I'll get those experts on the show and I'll ask them the questions that I need answered in order to help me be effective and efficient, right? When I'm communicating with my patients. Well, I can't just call a bunch of strangers on a show that doesn't exist. So what did I do? I reached out to my network. And one thing that physicians fail to realize often is that their network is filled with experts, right? Like, this, if one of your kids gets hurt, like, what do you do? You grab your cell phone and you text one of your friends who is, in a specialty that applies to said injury. Although you, considering what you do, you take care of everything. So I don't even know.
But it's true. Like you reach out to your people. It's like, it's your one perk as a doctor.
Yes, exactly. I've people like world-class people are on your Rolodex, right? And so that's what I started with. I just started interviewing people that were in my network that were experts and was able to the show started off not just being about communication. It started off being about anything that applied to being a doctor that wasn't necessarily clinical, right? Like my first episodes were advocacy. Like what's high return on investment advocacy for our profession? How do you do that? Another one was clarifying some things that people commonly got wrong about the Affordable Care Act. Because I just had a health economist in my network and I had someone who worked in advocacy in my network. And so those were two of the first episodes. And it just exploded from there. But I keep getting back to the communication part. And now after 400 episodes, I've become that go-to person for those communications experts. So I started off not being the expert and just asking lots of experts and then applying it to my own practice, going back with more questions, applying it to my practice, more questions, applying to my practice, and iterating until, I became the communication expert.
Right. Well, I guess that is ultimately the question. Did you answer the question you started off to answer for yourself? And on behalf of your listeners, do you feel like you're ongoing with that, but do you feel like you've been able to achieve some answers of how to incorporate listening in real life? Because that is very hard in our scripted 15, 20-minute interactions.
Well, it's interesting that you say scripted, because I think actually it should be more scripted. That's my argument, is because not every visit, but when you have challenging interactions that tend to go on and on and on and on, right? Whether the patient's perseverating on something that you thought you answered the question, but it turns out you hadn't, or you did, but they're just not there with you on it. Like these are the things that tend to drag on, or patients that they don't have boundaries and they just have like they want unlimited access to your time, right? So these things happen to us over and over and over.
To everybody.
And so
yeah, no matter what your specialty.
They should be scripted.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should have ways in which we know how to handle those issues when they happen. Identify them when they're happening, handle them, and then the patient, because you have a method, you're able to then take care of that patient effectively in a way because you've thought through how to do it so that they still appreciate the time you've spent with them. And so, but we don't always learn that, right? We learn how to break bad news. We learn, how to get the computer out of the way so you can make eye contact. Some of this stuff we work on, but a lot of the more challenging encounters that tend to happen, to your point, happen to all of us and happen over and over. We don't always know how to navigate those tricky situations.
Right. Well, and I'm just reflecting back to medical school and all the teaching, and in that setting, sometimes you did have plenty of time. Like, okay, you go in there, and the attending was going to go see 3 or 4 patients, and then we'll come back and, okay, now tell me about Mrs. Smith in room whatever that you went and spent 45 minutes with. And as a medical student, you have that, and then suddenly you're thrust into residency, and then as you're an attending, suddenly your time is your money, and everybody else on your team depends on your productivity. And so it's really a kind of a challenging thing. I
Yeah.
found for myself on a lot of these more challenging interactions, patients are really, really searching for some sort of connection with you. And so if you can ask them about, their family, or that's a really nice shirt you have, or tell me about something, but you don't want to launch into something that's like too deviating. And so you have to like be like, okay, well, that's great. Well, how are you feeling today? And it's, I don't
Yeah.
know. I think we all have to have our own little persona that we develop as doctors. And I've noticed that with my partners. Everybody has a certain way they interact, and it is kind of scripted. And it's interesting. I think we kind of gravitate to it naturally, or at least we should gravitate to that naturally over time.
Yeah, I mean, you make an excellent point, right? Like the trust building is important. There are a lot of times where you walk in the room and you know the diagnosis, right? Like from the chief complaint, and you're going to be right about it 95% of the time. So I know people argue like, oh, it's all in the history, it's all in the history. Yes, when you're a medical student, yes, it's important for you to spend all that time. But when you've been practicing as long as we have, it's not. You can make the diagnosis very, very quickly. Should you then blow in and out of the room really fast? No. So it helps to recognize that a lot of the purpose of the communicating is trust building. It's trust building. And so once you recognize that, some of that communication is going to flow a little more easily because you understand why the communication. Listen, they need to get their story out. They do. Like if someone's got benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, like I've been a practicing otolaryngologist for 13 years. I can't tell you how many times I've seen BPPV. I can usually spot it from the history within the first 30 seconds, right? But they need to tell their story. You need to let them get it out, right? It's part of the trust building. And so once you recognize that, then things go smoother. Then you recognize that this is relationship building as well. And it helps you enjoy it more rather than trying to blow through the visit, because you realize, everything has its place and 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 that it has a purpose.
Yeah, one example of that, just thinking back my own experience, I'm a doctor. I know the experience, I know what to expect. And I've shared with listeners on the podcast that I had this horrible 28 centimeter tumor that had to be removed. And when I went to the surgeon at the cancer center, I mean, she and I both knew what we needed to know before we walked into that room. We knew what the surgery would entail. I've been a part of a bazillion surgeries, and she's done thousands and thousands. We've all had that experience. And yet, the thing that sort of built trust is, and again, the information was already pre-decided. We knew what we were going to do, but the fact that she just sat down and even just in 10 minutes made eye contact, shared kind of her own personal experience with surgery and health problems that she'd experienced, it built trust. And my wife was there, and in that moment of just kind of trust building, there was like this bond formed, and then that person's looking out for you, and she understood what I was going to go through, and she was going to be there through that journey, and the subsequent years of follow up. And even though they're just 5-minute visits, it's that kernel of that little nugget of connection that really made the difference. And you're right, it's very hard to kind of navigate those waters as you're communicating with patients. Yet that is what our patients expect of us, to be human, to be connected, and to be present, even though we don't have that much time.
And like you said, it helps to be methodical. And you said, it helps to have a little small talk about something you notice about them, right? You notice their shirt has a certain team on it, or their keychain, or something, some little small talk that you can make with them that shows them that they are more than the sum of their symptoms. They are a person that you care about, right? Ask them something about them, talk to them about something unrelated to their symptoms, and it will pay dividends. So it's these little investments that you make in the communication that may be more time consuming at the outset, but they're going to lead to time saving and enjoyment from the personal connection. And they're going to send you their friends because they love you so much, right? These little things that you incorporate into your practice that just become part of your routine are critical. And like you said, part of it is recognizing that there's more to them than just their symptoms.
Right. Well, and patients, once you've invested, you don't have to invest that much in every single subsequent visit. I'm a primary care doctor, so I see a lot of my patients repeatedly. But when it's like just a person today that I saw, we blocked extra time because it was a new patient and spent the time kind of hearing the family story and what happened and why we're in this place, from a health standpoint. And I know next time I don't have to spend that much time because where the follow-up care is going to be following up on what we already have a relationship, and just taking those extra few minutes on that first visit will pave the way for the future. So I don't think we have to do that much. Anyway, I think they're excellent comments, Brad. I'm so thankful you've been able to learn that, and I know that we all have to keep learning it again and again and again.
Yes, it's like Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? That book is just full of truisms, right? Things that you should be doing, but don't. And so this is the same thing. We know we should be. Do I do this all the time? Right? It sounds great as I'm saying it. Do I do it every? Absolutely not. No, no. I am definitely a work in progress, and I know what I'm supposed to do, but I don't always practice it. And so it's the same thing. Like, what does Dale Carnegie say? There's no sweeter sound than the sound of someone's own name. So make sure that you use their name when they're talking. Do I do that? I know I should, but so it's about, like you said, learning it over and over again and practicing it over and over again. And I'm sure I'm going to be doing that for the rest of my career, and I'll never get it perfectly, but we'll
No.
just keep trying.
Yeah, likewise. We're all a work in progress for sure. Well, tell me about the podcast, because we've talked about what kind of drove you to it, but I want to hear a little bit about the nuts and bolts of how did you possibly find time to do this? Because you hear these podcasts, they seem so put together, and there's all these different components that go into a podcast. And so if you're a physician and you're saying, hey, I want to be a part of this community, or I want to start something like this, or I've got something to say that's kind of unique to this message, I think a lot of us are deterred by saying, I don't have time to do this. How would I possibly find time, energy, resources to learn about podcasting? I'd like to kind of hear your journey of how you did that.
So I have 3 kids. After my second one was born, I took paternity leave in a different way. I worked 4 days a week instead of what I was working like 5.5 days a week. So I started working 4 days a week, and we already had one at home. My boys my first 2 are 19 months apart. So like they were still napping, like the older one was still napping. And so I would have free time during the day. And so that's when I decided to start my podcast, was when I had this one day off per week where I wasn't seeing patients and didn't really have admin stuff to do. So that's when I decided to start my podcast, is on my paternity-ish
Well,
leave.
it's like a typical physician, Brad. Like, oh, I don't have something filling my time. I'll do something productive right now.
Exactly.
And
Yes,
I'm the same way.
which is a curse, which is we need to stop doing that. And I am not practicing what I preach in that regard, because whenever I whenever I drop one responsibility, I always take on 2 more. And it's this curse of busyness that we have. And so, yeah, so to this day, I've never edited my own episode,
Oh,
because
really?
one of my wife's best friends is a professional voiceover artist. And she started off editing my shows for me because she edited her own stuff. She started off doing audiobooks, and now she does like much more involved voiceovers. She's very successful. And so she started off being like, sure, I'll edit your show for you, no problem. And I put out an episode every other week. And then I realized that every other week I had so much to say. Not that I had so much to say, I had so much to learn. I had so many people that I want to talk to. I had so many ideas for show episodes that every other week wasn't enough. And so then I had to find an editor to edit my show. And so then I eventually outsourced it to someone else. And then it went on from there. Eventually, after doing this for a few years, I got connected with Desiree Leos, who through the Doctor
Yeah.
Podcast Network. And there was this and we had been, in each other's orbits. I had known people. I was on their show, and she had been working with them. So we had been each other's orbits for a while. And eventually they created this Doctor Podcast Network, which was the first iteration of it. And it didn't end up working out for a number of reasons. But I thought it was a great idea. And when that initial iteration of the network was no longer around, Desiree had some free time to take me up as a client. And then we started working together. And eventually the way that we had it worked out is I sit down at my computer with someone, with the person I'm interviewing. I hit record. I hit stop. I close my laptop. And they take care of everything else.
That is beautiful, Brad.
Everything else, which is amazing because I don't like posting on social media, but you kind of have to do it for the podcast, which, it's a dirty little secret that you don't really have to do that for your podcast. People don't usually find podcasts on social media. They usually find it on podcast players. So that's a different issue altogether. But still, they create the posts based on the content of the interview. And so all I have to do is find people to interview, write the questions, record, and she takes care of everything else. And I was like, we need to bring that back to the network because I want you to help other physicians live this dream as well. It's awesome. It's awesome that I can do that. And the other thing that we do at the network is we help people monetize because physician attention is worth a lot of money. And for those in the physician to physician podcast space, right? Not people that are podcasting to their patients because they have a different audience, but the ones that have a physician audience, like you and I, that's a high value audience. Now, do we want to sell them stuff? No, not necessarily. We just want to be able to monetize the content that we're making rather than having it cost us money because it's not free for this to happen. And I'd like to be able to continue doing it, but I can't continue doing it at a loss. And so we have sponsors. We have sponsors that we can get behind, right? I've had get behind that because that's going to help physicians not get lost in the administrative work of taking notes, right? Executives have assistants that write things down for them and send their emails for them, right? As physicians, we don't have that. But now we can have an AI scribe, disability insurance. Physicians should be having disability insurance. So we have sponsors that we can really support their product and want to help them get it out there. And so then we're also compensated for the time and effort of putting together this content. And so, we wanted to be able to provide that to other physicians that are looking to put their voice out there, and thus became the Doctor Podcast Network. So we reached out to people in our network who were podcasters. And then we reached out to Jimmy Turner. People know him as the physician philosopher. His show is Money Meets Medicine. Mike Wu Ming, who calls himself Bootstrap MD, because everybody's got their superhero name, right? It's your podcast name it's pretty cool. He's physician philosopher, Bootstrap MD. And so the four of us for the last year have been meeting frequently and coming up with the business plan for the Doctor Podcast Network. And a couple months ago, we launched. You're one of our favorite members, and it's going great. And it's going great. So we're helping a lot of physicians to get their voices out there and help them to be heard.
Oh, I've enjoyed being part of it. And we were talking before we hit record, how important it is to be able to have this, at least be able to cash flow. Because, if you're like me, you're raising a family, you've got payments to make on your home, you've got a life to live just like everybody else. And so if I do nothing but spend time and money on a passion project and it never pays back, it can never pay for itself, then it really is just, it's not going to be sustainable. It's a hobby.
It's a hobby.
I know my wife's not going to be real happy with it. If there's a way to be able to say, okay, I'm providing a tool or a service or something that would be beneficial to my peers, something that I myself would want to use and learn about, then it's kind of a win-win. We're telling them about a good service and then we can use that sponsorship to kind of help pay for the cost of doing the show, because it is expensive to put on to produce it and to have the equipment to produce it, all those kind of things.
Yes, indeed. It can be. There can be overhead. And so the monetization is a way to chip away at that overhead and maybe even make, be cash flow positive on it. The other thing is incorporating it into an LLC and then really running it like a business. And then yourself, you're in a rural practice. You own your own practice, right?
I work for a critical access hospital, but yeah.
So, the LLC, you can then deduct things from that, right? The computer that you use to podcast, the microphone.
Yep.
So there are other ways to leverage the
Yeah,
podcast as well. They're all on the up and up.
Yeah, we just filed taxes and did that very thing. It's great to be able to say, okay, this is a business. This is how much it costs, and as it produces, this is how much it produces. And just like any other business, you want to have it in its own specific category.
Exactly.
So what would you tell someone who is outside of Doctor Podcast Network resources? What would you tell someone who's in the, we talk about, with smoking cessation, you're contemplating, you're pre-contemplative, you're ready for action. What would you tell someone who's in the contemplative stage, who's saying, I want to be a part of this world. I want to get a message out. I want to help inspire others with my story or my experiences.
So the first thing that I would ask would be, what would be your goal? Like, what is it that you're trying to achieve with the podcast? And then, what does life look like for you when you have the podcast? And for me, one of the great things, and we were talking about this before the show, is the networking, right? Like, because I've been podcasting, I have a huge network of people that I can call upon that I now know because we did a show together, right? Like, I've got a big network. That's where Mike and Jimmy came from, is from just being in this podcast space. So if you're in the contemplative state, then one of the ways that it can benefit you from doing it is it'll help you grow your network. The other is just the creative outflow that comes from it. Like, I had a show a while ago on short-term rental properties, because can you really be a physician in the online space and not invest in real estate? I don't think it's possible.
It seems like everybody's on talks about that.
Exactly. Everyone. So what did we do? We bought into it, and we owned a short-term rental property, my wife and I. It's it's in upstate New York, and she runs it like it's her thing. She's so good at hospitality. We're really like leaning into her strengths with that, right? So she runs it. But one of the advantages of being a podcaster is you can get your own questions answered. So what did I do? I had a short-term rental property expert on the show. And then my wife sat next to me. She came down with me in the basement. We had our headsets on and our mics, and we did an episode with the both of us. So it was great. So there's this financial benefit of being able to, right, get those questions answered. But then my wife was like, I totally get it. I totally get why you come down. Like, you're exhausted. At the end of the day, you've seen patients all day. You're at home with the family, doing stuff with the kids, homework, and then bedtime. And after all that, you then go down to the basement and you record these podcasts. Like, I never understood it before, but having just done this with you, I totally get it. Like, it's a joy. It's a joy getting to connect with people and talk to them about stuff that you're really passionate about. It's just a joy. So, if you're in the pre-contemplative stage, there are so many benefits to it. All I spoke about just now is the networking and just the enjoyment of doing it. But there's also, building your brand. You want to put yourself out there as an expert in something. Podcasting is great for brand building and creativity, right? Like, finding out what other ideas are out there. So if you've got something that you do, either medicine adjacent or maybe not, whatever it is you happen to be talking about, it's going to be another source of, creativity for you as well, to get ideas that you never would have thought of if it wasn't for your podcasting.
Yeah. Well, on the program, we've talked quite a bit about having the ability to pivot, shift, change, adapt, as different chapters of your career go on. And I found podcasting to be really beneficial for all the same reasons you've just said. But I also have learned a ton from listening to other podcasts. Like, okay, these are some of my peers. There's only a limited number of licensed physicians in the United States. And every time I listen to a podcast episode, I usually take one or two things away from it, and then I can apply that to my own life. And then with that adaptability, flexibility, I can choose what I want to do. And like you said, I can outline what would my life look like if it was just a little bit more ideal, or what I want it to look like in a year or two. And I find that listening to podcasts, talking to other physicians is really informative for those kind of decisions.
100%.
Well, so in that same realm, um, talk to me just a little bit. We talk about finances and the ability to be a little bit financially flexible and that kind of stuff. Talk to this a little bit about the financial side of this. What would you tell a physician who is just starting, or someone who's in residency, someone in their attending years? What would you tell them about finances? If you could go back to the Brad Block of 10 or 15 years ago, what would you tell him?
It's funny because like being in this online world, it's it can make you feel like you're not doing enough, right? Like somehow, like if you're comparing yourself to people that have these big online footprints, it can really make you feel like you need to do more, right? And particularly in the financial space, and I kind of joked about it earlier, there is this huge community of people that invest in real estate, right? And they talk about all the tax benefits and all the amazing benefits of it. And I tried to get into it. I did. I really, truly did. But I just find apartment buildings so boring.
You
And
gotta love what you do.
yeah, like, yes, I understand the financial benefits and the tax benefits of it, but like, finding a syndication and then putting a bunch of your money in it, and do you trust them, do you not, like which is the right one, which is the, like I don't know. I tried consuming all this content in order to be a savvy investor, and I just found it so boring. So I think if I was talking to Brad from like 10 years ago, it'd be like, dude, just don't just find the stuff that you find interesting, right? Like I mean, I can understand index funds, right? That makes sense to me. Like don't pick stocks, because like everyone who's trying to pick stocks and predict the market is full of it. That makes sense to me, right? And it makes sense to me why apartment buildings would make money, but like I just can't sit there and like figure out which is the right investment. And so forget about that. If it's not for you, it's not for you, and just lean into what you like. So like I said, we bought a investment property that my wife now manages because we leaned into her strengths. So we combined like both of our strengths in that regard. Like mine was more logistical and hers is more hospitality, and we're doing really well with that. But if that's not for, but I've got a friend who was like, we're thinking about doing the same thing, and I'm like, are you guys both really interested in doing this, and do you have the bandwidth? And the answer was realistically no. So that now it's just going to be it's not going to be a source of joy. It's going to be a source of stress. So then it's not the right thing for you. Then you find what the right thing is. Maybe it's podcasting. Maybe you can, parlay this into a business if this is what brings you joy. Like find what brings you joy and lean into that. Financially, is that the best advice? Okay, maybe not. But my point is just the forget about the fear of missing out. And my example is the real estate, because that was just, I spent a ton of time trying to navigate it and figure it out. And it worked out in this one regard, but the apartment building thing is just, or, trailer parks or storage facilities or whatever. It's just, for me, not happening.
Well, and the principle, keep it simple, right?
Yeah.
That's I found in my own life is really busy raising kids, and think about how many hours a week you practice. And when you're ready to diversify, if you've got a lot of your buckets filled and all your tax advantage savings accounts are full, and you've invested in all the mutual funds, and if you want to do something in real estate, go for it. But you're right, you've got to be passionate about it, interested in it, willing to take the time, or have a spouse who's willing to take the time to do it, because it's a huge amount of investment, unless you're going to just do like a REIT or something along those lines where you are pretty passive. But if you're going
Yeah.
to go do direct real estate, you do have to put a bunch of time, there are some really passionate, amazing people who love it. But you're right, you got to find it, and so that's good advice. I like that.
And the REIT. The REIT is, they're index funds of REITs. And there you go. And then you're just back to index funds again.
Yeah, just kind of full circle.
Yeah.
Well, Brad, I've learned a lot. I think this is a great episode, and for anybody
Thank
that
you.
is interested in this, check out Brad Block, and the Physician's Guide to Doctoring. You can look up the Doctor Podcast Network. These are all great resources for all of us. And Brad, do you have any other final thoughts? Anything else you would want our audience to know tonight?
So it's funny when people used to ask me, would you recommend that other physicians start podcasts? My answer would always be no, because I'd say I don't need more competition. So no, don't start a show because I want people to keep listening to me and not listening to this other person's show. But now that I have that we've started the Doctor Podcast Network, I changed that answer. The answer is yes. The answer is yes, start a podcast because we want to help you do it. So both of those answers were totally self-serving. But no, but in all seriousness, I think, I'm at this cool part of parenting where my kids, my boys are 5, 7, and 8, and we're just discovering what lights them up. Like that's what my wife and I are really leaning into now, is finding what lights them up. And the term that we use is finding their cheese, right? We're all mice in mazes looking for the cheese, and it's important to have the right cheese. And I think for your listeners, it's important that you continue this pursuit of finding what lights you up. I think that's a huge part of life, an important part of life for those of us that have the privilege of being able to do that, right? Not everyone can do that. Some people are working, hand to mouth, and they don't have the privilege of being able to find. But for those of us that are physicians, you probably have some latitude there, and continue finding what lights you up, because I love having these conversations. This lights me up. And so find what lights you up and keep going after it.
Great parting words. Great advice, Brad. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I think this will be a great episode. A lot of people will derive a lot from this, and I look forward to connecting in the future.
Thanks a lot, Peter.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning into the Doctors Making a Difference podcast. And thank you for what you do to help your patients and your community. Your work truly helps so many people. We produce this content to help you have the tools you need to stay in medicine and to highlight the amazing work being done by physicians around the world. Please note that while I am a physician, and many of the guests on this program are also physicians or other professionals, the discussions on this podcast do not represent my employer or any professional organizations to which I belong. This podcast is for your information and entertainment only, and should not be taken as professional advice. You should seek appropriate professional advice pertaining to your own situation. Please check out more of our content on our website, doctorsmakingadifference.com. Also, please follow, like, or subscribe on your podcast player or YouTube channel, and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps to spread the message. Finally, if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, or if you'd like to nominate someone else to be a guest, please visit the website or email admin@doctorsmakingadifference.com. See you next time.